whether someone is telling you about going no contact with family or estrangement from a family, or you're going through it, is that it's not easy. This is not a tantrum about not getting your way. It's a huge decision. Have any of you ever gone no contact with a narcissistic parent or narcissistic family system? And then I want you to reflect on whether or not people got angry at you for doing that. My guess is yes and yes, but let's break this one down. Because this is what happens, right? You go no contact because you just couldn't do it anymore. And not only does a narcissistic parent get angry, so too does everyone else. So remember, no contact is a big topic in this conversation, and it's probably the strongest, heaviest tool in the drawer of the narcissism communication desk. It shuts communication down. You are no longer caught in the confusing word salad morass with them. But it's also not simple, and you may feel a sense of loss and grief, guilt, and even more confusion about whether you did the right thing by going no contact. And when it comes to family, it's the most difficult decision of all. It can take years and even multi decades for people to get to the no contact place with a family. Almost always, when I encounter a person who has gone no contact with a family, I know that this person has gone through years of hell, years of figuring out different ways of being in their family, of saying it, of silencing themselves, of not sharing feelings, of feeling hurt. And that, when it is family, that these cycles had started in childhood. It was a slow path of indoctrination, of having to live in subjugation to the parents' needs, of being shamed for wanting to be your own person, and learning that attachment, the lesson you got about attachment, was that attachment means having to give up on yourself to be loved. Now, most people don't get to the point of no contact with their families, but many do. And if you have gone no contact with a family member or a family, odds are that the reason you did that was because you hit a wall. That you'd been hurt so many ways, maybe you got into therapy, and finally in the face of a validating voice, you finally learned that your family system won't change, and you said no more. Maybe you were trying to protect children and vowed that your own children would not experience what you had to experience. Whatever your reasons were, they were yours, and you did it. There's no going no contact, especially in a family, without lots of pushback. Now, the initial reaction, it'd be interesting for you to use the comments to drop the kinds of reactions you got if you did go no contact, but the initial reaction is a severe anger. How dare you? How dare you not show up when I demanded you to? How dare you don't listen to me? How dare you not be available to me? How dare you think you can be your own person separate from me? How dare you deviate from this family's narrative? How dare you don't remain in my service? How dare you think you can be out of my control? Now, they don't say this out loud, of course, but you feel it. And so you face the anger. It's happening. You may not face it directly, but it's there. And you just made one of the most difficult decisions you'll ever have to make, and now have to endure being painted as selfish, cold, unforgiving, angry, ungrateful. And even if your goal was to go no contact with just one family member, the ripple effect is always going to affect the entire family system. And so, while you were attempting to go no contact with one or maybe two family members, even other people who were harmed by these narcissistic family members will be angry at you. Status quo is very powerful, and the manipulations and trauma bonds are powerful. Your attempt to go no contact with one person who didn't just harm you, but had invalidated so many, means that the rage you had become accustomed to had an even greater depth. Now, although you may not be facing their invalidation because you aren't in contact with them, you are in that uncomfortable position of tolerating their distorted view of you and the distorted view of you that they are sharing with other people. Your going no contact from your family can feel like rebellion, like defiance, and not what it really is at the core of it. Most people go no contact in an attempt to make themselves feel safe, to cut off the voices that threaten your sense of self. But your parent will be treating it as simple defiance. And it can give you pause and make you wonder, am I just being defiant and rebellious? And then again, play on that self-doubt and self-shame because you don't see it as safety. Now, this can feel really galling because while you are not surprised, you will recall how the narcissistic parent would basically go no contact whenever it worked for them. The silent treatment is a universal tactic that is used by narcissistic parents. It might be how they communicated disapproval, disappointment, you not being what they want you to be. The way that narcissistic parents deployed silent treatments when you were a child was part of the endless abandonments that constitute a childhood in a narcissistic family system. And into adulthood, if you are not what the narcissistic parent or family system wants you to be, if you disappoint with them, if you don't say what they want, if you don't be what they want, they will go no contact with you, or extended silent treatment, I guess, but it's for very different reasons. By and large, when survivors of narcissistic abuse engage in no contact, it's very self-protective. It is defeat. It is helplessness. It's a last resort. There's a lot of grief. When a narcissistic person goes no contact, it is often ego, it is punitive, and it's a way to maintain control and power, show everyone who's boss. And when this is done by a parent, it's also unacceptable. Their role is inherently different than that of a child and was far more developmentally impactful. So then that entitled hypocrisy pops up. They have been doing these fits and spurts of no contact for years and silent treatment when it worked for them, so they could punish you as part of their adult tantrum. And this hypocrisy feels really unjust. That they're allowed to go silent, that they could disappear and not respond, and yet when you finally decide to end contact, you're faced with rage and a character assassination. Now, it also gets complicated as time goes on. You may go no contact with a parent or a family member or family system, and then life happens. People get sick, people die. For some reason, you may get pulled in, and some survivors feel shame, like they failed because you might think that you broke no contact, that you failed at that. It's not true. You didn't fail. But rather, that period of no contact was essential and invaluable to you developing more autonomy, divesting from a system that denied your authenticity, your healing. You've been building up other supports. So if and when you do get pulled back into a family system for some reason, you are now stronger. The healing cannot be stolen back from you, and you can see it clearly. So it can be infuriating, shocking, and feel unjust when after you finally say, enough, I can't do this, I cannot be gaslighted by this system any longer, it's not okay, and I see it, and it's not going to change, and so then you decide to step away, and then you're met with anger that you went no contact, but there were never any attempts by people within that family system to change. It doesn't feel good. The whole flying monkey mess that follows up, that doesn't feel good either. But when you go no contact with your parent, it is your parent. So to do this, to go no contact, brings up primal feelings of abandonment, shame, fear, and grief. The reckoning that nothing you could have done would have made it better since childhood. And that's a heavy weight to carry. To recognize that for you to finally be you, to live honestly as yourself, to show up as you, that the only way that that was going to be able to happen in some cases was that you had to break out of this system, and that recognition hurts. Family estrangement is viewed very negatively, and certainly nobody signs up for it. Everybody just wishes for and craves a loving, attuned, and consistent family. Many of us don't get it. But because the estranger is always the one viewed as the problem, it makes this hard. When people judge estrangement, they do not focus on the abusive behavior that would have led up to someone making a choice to step away from a system, but rather on judging the person who stepped away from the narcissistic system. It can bring up massive feelings of helplessness because you then recognize the perpetual catch-22 you would have been caught in. Either put up with the harms of the relationship by your narcissistic parent, try and try and try, and then give up on yourself and slide into feelings of depression or despair. That's path one. Or make a choice for yourself that was deeply painful and to step away from the system and save yourself and then face the judgment of the world. All of these reasons highlight the injustice that makes healing from narcissistic abuse so difficult, and that healing often means getting okay with people not being okay with us. Right to the end, we want our parents sign off. Even if they're narcissistic parents sign off, we want them to sign off on what we do. But nobody does no contact because a relationship is healthy. And the fact is, nobody's going to be okay with you doing it. That's why you're doing it. But when they get really angry at you, after they are the ones who hurt you, remember that grief will always be at your side and that you didn't get here casually. Remember that. The child in you who was shut down when you tried to be you will appreciate it. No contact is never easy, least of all with a family. And again, it is that whole idea of estrangement that we are much more likely to pathologize the estranger and not the people who are behaving badly in a relationship. It's injustice wrapped in hypocrisy, tied with a gaslighting bow. It's very painful, but many, many people are not ready for the level of intense rage that they face when they step away from a narcissistic relationship and are struck by the absolute hypocrisy of a parent that had no problem with silent treatments and pulling away and even abandonment, being enraged when their child, adult child, doesn't respond to them exactly when they want. So folks, here's the thing. Nobody wants to be estranged from their family. So this morning, I read an interesting article about whether cutting off your family is good therapy. And even as I read it, I knew it would not end well. Some of you, not a lot, but some of you watching this video have gone no contact with your family of origin. Some of you have not. And every encounter you continue to have with your family is abusive and invalidating. And for a range of reasons, you may feel like you can't go no contact. And those of you who do not perceive an issue with your families or actually come from healthy families are probably not watching this video. So to those of you who went no contact, I'm going to ask you a couple questions. Was that an easy decision? Did you just go no contact after one argument? Did you go no contact because your family did one thing that hurt your feelings? Did you go no contact just because your parent didn't agree with you? My guess is no, you didn't. You went no contact because of an endless accumulation of wounds, hurts, invalidations, and in some cases, frank abuse and trauma that would be re-experienced every time you were with the narcissistic parent or family system. And ultimately, it became a choice between your identity and mental health and well-being and life, and continuing to see through some kind of obligation or guilt or sense that only people in really bad situations go no contact. To those of you who have not gone no contact, but keep enduring the same abusive patterns, I know the reasons that people stay in these family systems. Some people maintain contact because they feel guilt, obligation, doubt their own perception of the situation, and wonder if maybe they're reading it wrong, or they're being unfair, or they're making too big a deal out of it. Some of you stay in contact with a family because you have financial ties to a family, or because you are interlinked into a family system in which maybe you have children whom you want them to have a relationship with grandparents or extended family, but you still wonder if your parent will do to your kids what they did to you. Some of you have parents who threaten to harm themselves or even harm your other parent if you don't show up, and you can't keep calling 911 so it's just easier to show up. Some of you are still trauma bonded and think that it can still change. Some of you are afraid of the shame and the idea of any kind of no contact, or the idea of estrangement and the shame that estrangement brings up for you, which is incredibly understandable. Some of you would go no contact if you could, and have fantasies of what your life would be like if you did not ever have to deal with your parents again. Unfortunately, the article I read was not as balanced as it could have been, and it sort of simply wrote off the painful decision around estrangement or no contact as almost sort of like an easy way to not have to deal with the family anymore, which I believe missed the point. And then, of course, they interviewed old guard therapists who think it's just so terrible that any therapist would ever encourage a client to go no contact. And by the way, therapists don't encourage no contact. Good therapists understand it and support a client in the client's own decision making. As therapists, we're not supposed to have an agenda, but we're also human beings. And we can witness what having ongoing contact is doing to our clients. Any therapist who's able to remain neutral at witnessing a client be reharmed every single time they have contact with an abusive parent may want to go empathy shop. If it was as simple as don't have an agenda therapist, then AI is coming for my job really soon, which I think frankly it already is. But of course, the pièce de résistance in these articles is the comment section. And here's where that article got really interesting. Most of the commenters were teed up to shame the folks who were estranged from their families and went after the therapists who supported the decision. They'd say things like, family is great, you need family, go family. Being an adult is about compromise. These darn kids who just go no contact did that because their parent didn't give them their way. My guess is that a fair proportion of these commenters are the parents that the kids went no contact with, or just the really judgmental chorus of voices that shames anyone who has had to disengage from or distance from a family. The tricky thing with family is that family is about luck, like lots of things in life, but nowhere else is that luck more manifest than family. Some people get really, really lucky. They're born to loving, present, kind, well-regulated, patient people who listen. It doesn't matter if there's money or resource or not. I mean, money helps, but I've known folks raised in families where there were few resources, but there were lovely parents and other adults, and it was an inheritance like no other. And damn, the folks who grew up with resources and have really nice people, I mean, that's Powerball level luck shit. And some kids are born to narcissistic or alcoholic or mean or manipulative or deceitful parents who had no place having kids. These are dysregulated, cruel, withholding, abandoning, put their own needs before their child's needs people. That's just bad luck. The child is not responsible for their parents' lack of qualification or capacity to be a parent. It's bad luck. So when folks take the anti-estrangement, you must stay in contact, you only have one family stance, they're basically saying, play the bad hand you were dealt, no matter the harm it does to you, to which I say, F that. Encountering a narcissistic or toxic or harmful relationship in childhood is very different than if it happens to you for the first time in adulthood. And as a result, things that are done to us in adulthood, for example, what we may encounter in a relationship with an intimate partner or a friend, may not do the same level of scathing harm that it does in childhood. The silent treatment, the withholding, that stuff in childhood is lethal. It terrifies the child who is genuinely afraid that the parents will go away and metaphorically and literally disappear. So the child will do anything to end that silent treatment and slowly then get subjugated into a cycle of being that parent's narcissistic supply, emotional babysitter, tool of regulation, and being the parent's parent. How is that forgivable? All of this shapes the child's identity and frankly thwarts the child's identity that now gets shaped solely around the idea that I have to be what my parent wants so I can be loved, and then ultimately sets a person up for a lifetime of subjugated relationships if the cycle doesn't get broken. And folks, as you know too well, this is not an easy cycle to break. And parents are like kryptonite. You may actually be functioning well in other areas of your life, like work and friends, but then having to see that parent again can lead you to feel like that subjugated and scared child again. And that parent is not going to change. So for some folks, no contact or avoiding contact is the only path forward. Even in the article, there were parents interviewed who felt oh so sad about how much of their adult children's lives that they were missing, graduations and weddings and grandkids, and a small acknowledgement like, yeah, I was an alcoholic, and yeah, I screamed a lot and made the house a scary place, but that was then. Can't they see that I'm trying? It's not a child's job to see that you're trying, whether that child is a child or an adult. That parent has to recognize that we get one chance at childhood, and the harms that are done at that time, while to some degree are fixable, those fixes aren't easy. And even with the fixes, those wounds don't ever go fully away. So the adult parent still makes it about themselves. Oh, I'm missing out on so much, and sure, I did a few bad things, rather than my behavior must have been terrifying for a child, and it wasn't okay. Making amends doesn't mean the other person has to accept them. And even the most skilled apology does not carry with it the requirement that the other person has to take it and clean the slate. Perhaps the only way to move forward is to recognize the slate will forever remain messy, and then backing that up with radical acceptance. All of that means that your parent likely will always remain locked into these patterns. Choose accordingly. Many people who are estranged struggle until the end of their parents' lives and beyond. Should I have gone to visit? And then, for those who do go visit, will say, "Oy, that was a mistake." There are no winners in this. For some folks, the only way to maintain a healthy adult life is to go no contact. And given what we know about any kind of antagonistic or toxic personality style, that makes sense. The parent is not likely to change, and the subjugation cycle will then shift to how selfish and unforgiving that you are, that you can't just let go of the past, Junior, and they were just not ready to be a parent, etc., etc. You know the drill. Listen, I can say this as a therapist. I have worked with many, many clients where in my heart, my hope was that they would go no contact, because I could see how devastated they were every time they had contact with their parents or their family of origin. And they were living their lives in a psychological purgatory with parents who had no capacity for insight. But it wasn't my place to say go no contact. My role was to support their decisions and shore them up for the inevitable disappointment and help them connect the dots. I have also had clients go no contact and doubt that decision every single day. And every so often, there was a client who went no contact and blossomed, and they saw that the going no contact is what contributed to their growth. There is one more twist here, and that is if you are a parent who is disengaging from a toxic, narcissistic, manipulative, antagonistic child, it raises similar issues. Now, if the parent who's disengaging is antagonistic and the child is antagonistic, then all bets are off, and I just hope that nobody really gets hurt. But if the parent who's choosing to disengage is not antagonistic, or perhaps one parent was and the other parent was not, and the non-antagonistic parent is the one who's choosing to disengage, the damage is done where the child's concerned. Some parents, after years of being financially abused, lied to, taken advantage of, raged at by their child, will come to this decision as well. Again, it's not easy and even more complex, because a parent making this decision may also reflect back onto what was their contribution on their own child's behavior. Estrangement is like a train depot with lots of lines coming in and out. There's no simple pathway to this. So no, TikTok or YouTube or the internet is not what is leading people to become estranged from their toxic, harmful, invalidating families of origin. It's the family's behavior that's leading to that. Everybody wants to belong to a family system, and nobody gives it up lightly. But for the first time ever, we're having deeper conversations about what the meaning of going no contact from a harmful family system is, the grief around it, but also understanding that in some cases, some people actually find solace in it, and that instead of shaming people who make an incredibly difficult decision, perhaps we all need to pause a moment and really hear their story. Estrangement is a hot topic these days, and again, I was doing some reading on it recently, and in one piece I had read, specifically addressing the issue of no contact, and the idea of therapists actually supporting clients in their decision to go no contact. Now, the article was a little misleading because it made it sound as though the therapists were encouraging the clients or the patients to go no contact. But what was happening is that the therapists were saying it's okay to go no contact and that it could help. Estrangement and going no contact, especially family settings, is no joke. It's the DEFCON 1 of solution. It's the tourniquet of first aid approaches. It's the end of the line. I have spoken before on this idea that nobody comes to this decision of estrangement easily. Well, nobody, really. Yeah, almost nobody does. And unfortunately, what often comes up is that it is perceived that when a person makes a decision to go no contact with a family member or even an entire family, that it was some kind of easy breezy decision that they made. My family is pissing me off and not giving me my way. I'm going to show them and I'm going to cut them off and not talk to them anymore. There's sort of a spoiled child stigma about people who become estranged from their families, as though people make this monumental decision around estrangement from family members because they just didn't get their way and they're just throwing a massive adult tantrum. Estrangement shaming is pretty common. And as you can imagine, when it comes to narcissistic family systems, it is often a tool, this idea of no contact or estrangement, that works very well. Sadly, it can become the case that ongoing contact with the narcissistic family system can be quite harmful, and that by the time a person goes no contact with a narcissistic family system, that they have suffered and suffered and hoped and tried and had those hopes dashed and tried and blamed themselves, and radical acceptance then often becomes the catalyst to no contact. It is a big decision to make because to go no contact can upend a family system, because it is all but impossible to go no contact with just one family member, especially a family that's connected to each other. Oftentimes going no contact means you lose everyone, and not everyone wants that. But the assumption that the person who makes the decision to go no contact is simply a petulant adult baby person is wrong. I've worked with clients in a range of situations. Some of them have gone no contact with selected family members and sometimes with entire family systems for years. And there was grief and a sense of loss, but ultimately a sense of peace. Not one of them regretted it. They definitely regretted that this was their lot, that this was their story. But they didn't regret the decision that they made. Others couldn't go no contact for a range of reasons. Culture, a close attachment to other family members that they would lose if they went no contact with anyone, fear. And they found themselves on a revolving carousel of ongoing abuse that they would often attempt to do workarounds on. None of them came to these decisions lightly, and many of the ones who could not do no contact often wished they could and recognized very clearly how much easier their lives and how much better their overall health would be if they did not have to maintain contact. Now, obviously, narcissism and other forms of antagonistic personality styles in family members are not the only reason that people go no contact. Some people go no contact because childhood trauma and abuse were denied by family members, or because there is ongoing physical abuse in the family system, or there is financial abuse, or because family members may represent a risk to minor children coming into the system, or there's unresolved substance use or an addiction, or there's violence and aggression. And these all may be patterns that are denied or enabled by other family members, simply making the family of origin too dangerous. As I have also said before, the estrangement that people may find themselves in and the no contact they may decide for when they have a narcissistic family system is not the same as the silent treatment or passive aggression and withholding that a narcissistic person may engage in to punish other people. Basically with the goal of forcing other people to apologize, even when the other people have done nothing wrong, to break the silence and to break the no contact. That's not what I'm talking about here. But estrangement or I should say the shaming of estrangement and no contact, that's not going anywhere. And what that means is that if you make a decision to go no contact, I know it is or was a painful and difficult decision, and there's a lot of hurt on the path to getting there. However, do not think that all people can hear about your no contact or your estrangement with an open and wise ear. You have to be discerning in how you share it, or the shaming and the negating can be too painful, and it can set your healing back. Some of you may not give a damn what other people think, which is great. However, others of you may still feel that this is new and you're not ready to face the judgment of others around something that's this raw and this vulnerable. Perhaps you never will be. So be careful, because you would be surprised at how often people will treat something as heavy as going no contact with a narcissistic family system as though it is just a silly conflict that could be figured out with some forgiveness and talking it through. Discernment ultimately means figuring out who your safe people are. But the big piece to remember, whether someone is telling you about going no contact with family or estrangement from a family or you're going through it, is that it's not easy. This is not a tantrum about not getting your way. It's a huge decision that while it can often take many people to a much better place, it's never easy. And it's one that can take people a long time to get to. It takes as long as it takes. I want to throw in one last piece here, which is that we often treat estrangement and no contact as a forever kind of a situation. Some people need time down. What we talk a lot about when we're talking about what happens in especially narcissistic family systems is, the fancy word for it is a loss of subjectivity. Basically, you lose your sense of self. You lose your identity. You don't even know who your authentic self is. And as long as you're in that family, you have to sort of fit you have to fit your square peg into their round hole kind of thing. And that the only way to really find yourself is to separate out from that system for some period of time. For some people, that's a couple of years. For some people, that's a decade or longer. And at the end of that time, sometimes there's an event, a catalyzing event. It could be a death. It could be an illness. It could be a coincidence. And there may be an event that puts you back in the fold with that family. And in some cases, you may find that now that you're fully possessed of who you are, what you're about, that you can stand strong in the face of it and give yourself permission to step away, that some people may find that there's an opportunity for repair where others will say, this will always and forever be a traumatizing system. So I think one of the other misperceptions we make about estrangement and going no contact is that this is a permanent decision. In some cases it is, and in some cases it's not. But I think that the piece you need to address is not get yourself caught up in what's going to happen down the line. but what is the right decision for you now, and what is going to facilitate your healing, your mental health, your growth,